Yes, team, and a huge welcome to the Total Mental Performance Podcast. I've been really looking forward to shooting this podcast for a long time, and the reason I've been looking forward to it is it's something that I advise many of my clients, and the team advises many of our clients, is actually getting hold of an assistant, getting hold of a really high quality human that's going to help you free up time, free up bandwidth, so you can go and do the stuff in your genius zone. Today, we have a very special guest. It's Le-an Lacaba. She is the co-founder of 2XU, and she actually helped me find Kirsten. And Kirsten is my second brain, as they call them at 2XU. She has completely changed the game for me. And Le-an found Kirsten, and the entire process has been phenomenal. And everything that I've learned on that journey, we're going to be discussing that today on the TMP podcast. So, Le-an, a huge welcome to the pod.
Thanks so much, Kieran. I think this has been rescheduled all the way from June. I was actually looking up basically how long we've been trying to schedule this in. So I'm glad 2 months later finally are on this.
Yeah, travel's been absolutely crazy, and then getting the time zones all nailed. So yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time too. So thank you for your patience. In terms of what you do, if you could just describe to our audience, like, what is it that you actually do, Le-an?
So for us at 2XU, a lot of what we do is exactly what you described. We hire, manage, and train a lot of, we now to call them AI enabled executive assistants for a lot of our clients internationally. So what that could look like could be us, the usual executive assistants like email management, calendar management, all the way to operations management, where an EA could be managing your team, managing projects, managing how things run. And it usually does start with the email and calendar management part, and evolves later on.
Cool. And how do you get into that? Because obviously you've now built an agency with a whole entire internal team, and then you've also got a load of top assistants. How did you get there?
So for me, my journey kind of funny enough starts all the way back when I was like 15 years old, because that was when I started like finding out that you can work online.
Mhm.
And it went full circle for me about, I think, 5 years later when I was 23, 8 years later when I was, no, 15, 7 years later when I was 23. And I was thinking it through of like, okay, now what business do I want to do? Because then at that point I was running someone else's, like now my now co-founder's book publishing company. And I was playing around like, hey, I want to start my own business from scratch. And I was thinking through like what would be a good one where it's a services company, because then I want to give back to other people who want to explore being able to work remote, because I've been working remote my whole life at that point until now. So virtual assistants was one that was a back pocket idea from my co-founder, where he said, I actually have this course on how to hire and manage a virtual assistant from the Philippines specifically. And I was like, okay. So we recreated his whole 20 modules. Basically, we recorded everything, updated everything. We were selling it. It was doing well. And then we got started getting invited to do all of these talks. And then at one point, we were in Singapore, and we were teaching this. We were doing a workshop, and someone came up and said, I love what you do, but can you just do it for me? And that's essentially how 2XU started,
Mm.
was someone else wanting to just not skip all of the usual headaches that come with hiring, with training, of managing people. And that's essentially how the whole agency started.
Well, that's the best form of entrepreneurship is listening to problems and then going, oh, I
Mhm.
can I solve that? Can I fulfill that? And that's essentially what you've done, which is amazing. I found you guys through Daniel Priestley. So Daniel Priestley was holding a really small mastermind. There was like eight of us, and I was the youngest in the room by about 15, maybe 20 years. And
Wow.
there was a moment, right, where one of the guys in there was talking about hiring. He was trying to hire Richard Branson's former assistant, and
Ooh.
I
Mhm.
said, "Oh, cool. If you don't mind me asking, like, how much is that gonna cost you per year?" And he said, "Anywhere between 160 to maybe 200K." And I was like, "Whoa, you're gonna pay that to an assistant?" And at the time, I
Mhm.
had a part-time assistant, and I was like, "You what? Can you just run me through the logic?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's really simple. If you have a top assistant, I'm freed up to do all of the stuff that I'm good at, and that generates a hell of a lot more money." And I couldn't quite. I was like, "Wow." And I said,
Fathom it.
Explain that to me. Explain that to me more." And he's like, "If I hire her." the level of complexity that she's been dealing with Richard's businesses, she can handle my complexity like easy, and my life is going to become so effortless, so simple. My job is to try and convince her that I've got enough fun stuff for her to work on. And then,
Mm.
like the conversation kind of took over the whole room, and they asked me, "Like, have you got an assistant?" I was like, "Yeah, I've got one like part time." They're like, "Part time? Why have you got a part time assistant?" And they were, and even Daniel was like, it was almost like, "Oh, the penny hasn't dropped for him yet. How adorable!" And I was like, "Oh man." So I said to Daniel, "Okay, Daniel, I get it. All right, yeah, noted. I need a full time assistant. Where can I find one?" And he said, "Check out 2XU. They manage the entire process." That's actually how I got introduced to you guys, and I was so impressed from like day one, like the whole understanding of your end to end process. I'll butcher it if I try and explain the process. Can you explain the process of how you of what you do?
Well, no worries. Well, I want to add to it a little bit of your story though. That's such a common thing where people think that, oh, I just need a part time assistant, but in reality, if you really want to have quote unquote like true freedom, that only comes with having a person who's not worried about their next client that they're working with. So on the process of 2XU, so it really starts with just a conversation with whoever wants to have an assistant, kind of like how we started, where I kind of dive into what are the things that you need to do that can't be delegated. That's the first thing I actually usually try to get. Like, okay, what are the things that you want to do versus other things? Okay, now we can start going through what are things that you want to start delegating and giving to someone else. I run them through, favorite exercises, the surgeon story of like you're a specialist in your field. As a coach, your main thing is showing up for these calls. So what else is everything in between, before and after those calls, that an assistant can start taking care of you for? And then we identify like, oh, you need this kind of assistant. Okay, so then we go into the deep dive call, which is more of that interview of like, okay, what are your values? What would be a good match for you as a kind of person? What would the first kind of KPIs for your assistant for them to focus on? So we start off really clear on the goals. So as we're going through within 2XC, we're going through the recruitment process. We're looking at our current pipeline. We're looking at maybe someone we have already shortlisted. They've gone through everything else, or we might go through the whole process of usually having to find a person from scratch, which is a little bit takes about 4 weeks to 6 weeks. But for you, I remember Kirsten was about, I think, 2 weeks in, we were able to find Kirsten already because we just closed another client who was looking for a similar kind of EA. And that he found someone. I'm like, oh, Kristen might be a perfect match. It could be as quick as that. Or, like I said, some of our clients, it might take 4 to 6 weeks, but just because of different circumstances. And then we, of course, make sure they're onboarded right with you. We have the 90-day program to make sure you guys are all set up. And then, of course, we have the regular check ins to make sure that the systems are right. Plus, we have the starting up your procedures and BOS process, basically, or business operating systems process that we go through to make sure things are documented right. So even if I usually try to joke like if you or your assistant gets eaten by sharks, things can keep running.
Yeah. Yeah, and the detail that came up in that, like you were asking me how I communicate, how I text, how I prefer to receive information, how I
Mhm.
prefer to process information,
Yep.
the kind of people I connect with the most, the ones that I don't, my strengths, my weaknesses,
Hmm.
and that there was so much depth in there that when I was getting applications through, and even the applicants that you sent over, it wasn't like, oh, here's a CV. It was like, hey, here's a CV. Here's two recordings of two interviews. Here's two competency tests. Here's their skills. Here's their weaknesses. Here's why they're a great fit for you. Here's where they might trip up, and here's where you might need to be patient. And it was like, yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. And Kirsten has been like a superstar. I can't imagine life without Kirsten now. She's been so great at what she does. I think in the past, one thing that's really underrated is, and I'd love you to talk a little bit about this, is SOPs for
Hmm.
assistants. Because what I noticed was whenever I'd hire an assistant, first of all, I didn't know how to build the SOPs. Second of all, I didn't actually build them at all. So it was kind of
Hmm.
like this big shit show. Whereas you are able to install pre-built SOPs into my business, and and it essentially saved me a job of having to train someone. Like,
Yeah.
what would you say the biggest mistakes are when online entrepreneurs hire assistants? are? Would you say it's just SOPs? Is there other ones? What would you say comes up?
I have a whole list. As you can imagine, I've been doing 2 weeks, 5 years this October, which is fantastic. So the main one is one where I usually try to steer people away from is thinking that their assistant's a unicorn. Like, oh, I need a marketing, sales, admin, operations,
Mm,
bookkeeping assistant. I'm like, no, we focus on like at least two main things, maybe third one if it's not too heavy, because your assistant isn't supposed to be another you. It's supposed to be a complement of you, even
mm,
though they're your second brain. They're supposed to. That's why I asked that the strengths and weaknesses question, because they're supposed to complement and superpower you to do what you do best, so then they can focus on the things that you might not be enjoying. So that's the first one. The second one is on the system side is a really good one, just because a lot of the time people kind of give up on hiring because they think like, oh, I have to train this other person, I have to do this, I have to do that. But in reality, if you have a good screen recorder, or you can do Zoom even, and you walk someone through, record everything, and then have that person write the SOP. For us at 2XU, we have a really robust template already, but it could be a really simple setup at first, and then kind of having that person create the SOP for you, check it, like, oh, okay, we missed this one step. Oh, I usually do this one shortcut. That's why you probably didn't see it. So then it's a smoother way to kind of build systems out, because you're having someone who has never done it before write that SOP. So then you can catch also your own shortcuts or tricks that you've learned, just because it's easier for someone who's done it 10 times versus the first time. And a third really good one is they only hire based off of the skills that they need or the experience that they need, forgoing the part where it has to be someone you would want to work with. Because we've all had workplaces where there's that one toxic person, but they're amazing at what they do. So, like,
mm.
do you let them go? But then you might lose sales, and in reality, you're already losing a lot of morale and wanting to go to work, just because this person is actually isn't a match for who it is that you need as a person, not just as the skills that you need for this. So those are the three main ones I always see.
Mm. Yeah, the match thing for me has always been innate because I've worked in environments where we've had loads of high performing arseholes and it's not been fun. On the
Hmm.
flip side, you've had the other opposite side where everybody's lovely but nothing's getting done, and that's also another level of frustration.
Yeah.
So that match was very intuitive for me when I was looking through everyone. The SOPs thing has just been a game changer. Like that's been my weakness. And if you're somebody that struggles with operations, so what Kirsten does for me is marketing and operations. So the calendar management stuff, booking all of my flights, making sure that accommodation, scheduling meetings, payments. She manages all of that, and was great with Kirsten. Was her background was an agency side in marketing, so she is really good at scheduling all of my Instagram, all of my emails, all of even now she's actually started picking up ads. So one of my partners has been training her
Mm-hmm.
on doing Facebook ads. She said, "I've always wanted to do them. I've managed accounts with them, but I've not actually done them yet." And she's got this really proactive side where she's doing the study, doing the learning, picking everything up, and I think you're right. If I tried to kind of get marketing, sales, operation, like everything, it would have been too much.
Hmm.
Whereas we started with, right, what are the core operational tasks? What are the key admin tasks? And what are the key marketing tasks? And then we've kind of built that over time. So now
Yep.
I know that stuff's going and stuff's moving. But I think that was a really good bit of advice. Just pick the one or two key things and you can build from there.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
So when actually hiring and preparing for a VA, what advice would you say, or what would you say the biggest mistakes are that come up for people that are hiring and looking at potential assistance?
A mistake that you see people make, and this is coming from Gary Vaynerchuk, where a lot of people try to hire fast, but then they fire slow, which it always should be the other way around, where you want to hire slow but then fire fast
Mm,
with people, because you want to take your time in figuring it out. Because, like, for example, in 2XU, I always give clients a heads up, like, hey, you might see one or two candidates first, and then based on your feedback on them, then we can refine our process a little bit better. Like, we have a client who at the very beginning for their company, like, oh, I just need someone to manage operations. They saw two or three applicants and like, oh, actually, I need someone who's more of a project manager. So then we were able to refine because they already saw a couple of examples. And if you went ahead and like, oh, let me hire the second person or the first person you sent me, then it's a little bit rushed versus like, oh, I just need. I always describe it like when you fall in the tree, you want to diagnose first the bleeding arm, but inside it might be broken bone. So a lot of the times when we're in pain, we focus on what's bleeding, not looking at like the inside where there's still some damage. Where hey, I actually don't need this surface level what I thought I needed. Actually need this specific skill. That usually goes through when you are hiring and talking to people, and you get asked questions and you see more clearly what it is. That's the first one. Another mistake is not. I always tell people this of put Easter eggs when you're writing up job ads. Like in 2X, you've kind of mastered this where if they're sending something, they have to put it in their resume. Like, hey, put magic assistant, for example, or put in kick-ass assistant in your resume because that filters out people who are just mass applying. And
Mhm.
I've in the very early days when I was still managing the recruitment side of 2XU, I would get this mass email where they sent it to 50 other people in
Yeah.
their one resume. And I'm like, you're auto rejected.
Oh.
So you want to put in filters basically of how to make sure that this person, one, actually read the job ad, and two, is actually the match for you. Because, of course, when assistant, you need someone who's detail oriented, and that comes with them reading the job ad. And the third mistake is not testing them. So for us at 2XC, we give them skills tests. We have them go through the interviews. And it even depends if a person feels like we really want to have them. Might not have a client match for them yet, is we'll even have them go through a 1 week test of like, how are they when it comes to responsiveness, to communication. And for some of the people that I consulted with very early on in 2XC before we had the agency, so I would tell them like, hey, test out your assistant for at least 2 weeks of working with them and tell them that it's a trial period before jumping right in and calling this person your everything, because then you're actually able to see how you actually work together. That's why it's hiring slow, and also figuring out also if you're ready to hire someone too.
Hmm. Yeah. So let's go to part-time assistants versus full-time assistants. I know in a lot of online entrepreneurs, and I was one of them. They want to start. Oh, I don't need that much. I'll only start part-time, and I'll share my experiences and my stories later. But I'm curious for you. What have you observed the patterns are between part-time assistants and full-time assistants and entrepreneurs, particularly for ones that are worried about what if I don't have enough work for them?
Well, the biggest one is the one that I already commented on is when you have a full-time assistant, that's really when you have the second brain effect, because they're not thinking about other clients. They're not thinking about how they're going to fill out the next couple of hours in their day. They're focused only on you. That's how they start getting ideas in the shower. That's how they start becoming more proactive and taking initiative, because they're fully you. Versus like if you had someone who's just managing your inbox and calendar, but they're not seeing everything else. They don't have the context to be able to be more proactive and give suggestions and ideas. That's the biggest one. And when it comes to um, for people who are like, oh, I don't think I need someone full time just yet, it's so easy to go into it once it becomes a muscle that you're giving someone tasks that you don't have to do, that it's so easy to fill in a 40-hour work week. Like we did do it in the beginning with 2XU where we had part-time um, clients and assistants, and it quickly turned like within a month sometimes, or within maximum of 3 months. That's why we designed the onboarding program, that they start giving their EAs more, that it's becoming then 40-hour work week. So never underestimate how much, because you've been doing it so fast as a entrepreneur, because you're wearing so many hats, never underestimate how it might be to free yourself up from that one tasking to someone else. Like I remember when I started doing YouTube, I was like, oh, I can take care of the editing of my videos. Turns out it was taking me 8 hours a week, because I actually measured how many hours it took. So then that was one of the first things that I delegated. So it's keeping in mind that the hours or even the minutes that you put in working on the things that are running the company instead of growing it is costing your company or your business that much of not being able to grow because you're just running it.
Mm, yeah, and I think yeah, consistency is a word that comes up for me. in the past with the assistants that I had, they were great human beings. They were really good at what they did, but it was harder for them to be consistent for the reasons like you said. They're either looking for other gigs or they're doing it around something else. So that maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're a student or maybe they're a parent or whatever, and things are moving all the time. So it's much harder. Whereas flipping from a
Yeah.
part time assistant to a full time assistant was like a game changer. I think when I was at that room I mentioned earlier, and they went, "Oh, he hasn't figured it out yet," and so I was like, a real moment where I was like, there's got to be something in this. And then
Exactly.
I actually said this, I think it's to AJ, who's our account manager. I was like, if I had Kirsten and this set up from day one, I think our business would be so much further ahead than it was, right? But hindsight, it's 2020 vision, and you can only connect the dots looking backwards. But for me, I think even just speed of implementation. So the with a full time assistant, you get a lot of stuff done same day, whereas with a part time, it might not be till the next day or 2 days later. Um, and one thing that me and Kirsten have set up, like, and I really want to give Kirsten a huge shout out because I can't imagine living without her now. She's amazing. She's on the ball.
Mhm.
She's really switched on. But one thing we set up, and this might be helpful for anyone listening, is I was chucking lots of various different tasks from different parts of the business at Kirsten, and she is getting a little frustrated and a little overwhelmed. And that's my job. I'm a mental performance coach, so I'm all about flow state productivity. How do I get people flowing? So
Mhm.
one rule that we set up for Kirsten that was a game changer for anyone that's listening that's got an assistant was we set up a daily structure. So we have something called ad hoc tasks. So ad hoc tasks are, hey Kirsten, can you transfer this payment? Or hey Kirsten, can you send this client a gift? Or can you book this flight or whatever? These are just ad hoc things that just pop in. Um,
Mhm.
Another big part of her role was focusing on marketing, particularly game plans from our consultant. So within that, um, there was a lot of task switching happening because she'd be going into deep flow to work into this, and I'd say, "Hey, Kirsten, can you process this payment?" And she thought everything had to be done now. So by having an ad hoc block for 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the at the end of the day, uh,
Hmm.
any random tasks that I throw at Kirsten, I will tell her this needs to be outside of an ad hoc block. It's absolutely urgent. But if I throw you an ad hoc task and I don't say that it's urgent, just put it into the next block. So we both know
Yeah.
at the beginning of it's either going to be action at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, and there's going to be 2 hours split, and then the other 6 hours are split between either marketing, also that game plan that we're talking about, or specifically social media. And that simple setup has been such a game changer. And Kirsten said, "Yeah, I'm just really clear." And I think that's something that to really consider is making sure that you've both got a daily structure that works with each other. I mean, what would you say around daily structure and communication times and working hours? Have you got any specific advice around that?
Well, that first of all, that's a really good system, and that's probably something that uh, we can actually also just integrate a little bit better with our clients and our EAs because it is different. Like each client will have a different way. Like we have clients where they check in with their EA once a week, and then they're good for the rest of the week. They actually are really good in flow. Some of them, like for me, I still do my daily check-ins with my EA just because there will be times where things just slip off of my head like, oh yeah, I was supposed to talk to you about this, or
No,
I just needed to give you this update. So that's a really good system for a lot of people where and it's a common thing. It's like, especially for you and Kirsten, you guys have been working, I think 8 months now, almost coming into 9. It does get to the point where she has her focus tasks, and then of course the ad hoc tasks that will come in and out as well that are really important but not as urgent. Is a really good way to capture it. So for other ways on keeping in sync, basically with the EA, they said for me, I have, even if it's just a 10-minute call with me and my EA, we both feel a little bit better because like we've both had times where when we don't sync, even if we skip like a day or two, we both feel weird about it. Like, oh yeah, we haven't talked to each other in so long. Um, and it's just checking in of like what was done yesterday, what's your focus today, and what are bottlenecks. Those are the three questions, and then it's usually it. For me, it could be like, hey, this is what I worked on. Hey, can I get your thoughts on this? Can I get you to work on this, or can I get you to add on this? Like yesterday, I created a whole new slide deck for a talk I'm doing on Saturday, and she's just like, oh, okay, got it. I'll review everything. I'll send any other edits that I have in mind your way. So then it just keeps us in sync. But like I said, for some clients, it's once a week. Sometimes it's twice a week that they have check-ins with their EAs, depending on what works. It's important to find what makes sense for you and the EA, because then it won't matter if you're meeting every single day if nothing is actually getting discussed or getting done. And then there's also the for clients of ours who are from the US, of course, time zones is a little bit crazy. So I always recommend like at least 2 to 3 hours where you're kind of co-working, where you're either on a call together, you've synced, or you might be even working side by side. We have clients where they'll just share their screen with their EA on Zoom because at least their EA can see what they're doing and see what they're working on. And then if there's questions, the EA can easily like pop in, like, oh yeah, what if about this? Can I get clarification on that? So finding a way where you spend some time with your assistant is also key. And one that I always tell people is that when you're working with Filipino virtual assistants, just ask them about their family. Like ask them like, hey, how's your dad or your mom? Or
Mm.
my favorite question to my EA is like, how's your dog today? Just like, oh, last night they were like barking at the door, so I kicked them out, blah, blah, blah. So then it gives me a little bit of context on where their head is at. Like, oh, okay, so I can give them this task or I can work with them on this. So it gives a little bit of knowing where their headspace is at, depending on what their environment is.
Yeah, we do a daily check-in. So at the beginning of the day on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, we check in, and Kirsten, that like she's got this is such a beautiful structure, and it's like, right, this is what was done, this is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on, here are the potential bottlenecks, here's what I need from you. And every day just rocking up in that structure is gold, because my brain's very scattered. I really struggle with detail and project management and whatever, whereas that's one of Kirsten's strengths. So she'll come in, and I every single day I know what's been done, I know what's being worked on, and I know any potential roadblocks. So when the roadblock comes, I'm not like, oh, what's going on, what's holding us up? No, I already know, I'm already ahead of that, and we can battle plan ahead of that. And then also, what for one thing I find is whenever I'm just about to hang up, I get another task I need to hand off. And it's like she's like,
Yep.
"Have you got anything else?" I'm like, "No, I don't think so." Oh, Kirsten, wait, and then what? This, and then I find a
Yep.
daily cadence is very helpful, and if you're an ADHD like me, then that daily structure is very key. I also find if I have a day where I don't have much on, and I don't have a call to check in with Kirsten on structure or like what's going on, I can get really distracted. But just that 20-minute check in the morning of Kirsten, what you up to, and she can say, Kieran, what you up to, that just helps me focus. And I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
There's something about a call that lights my brain up. So then afterwards, I'm very
I think
productive afterwards.
accountability too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That makes a huge difference. So
Yeah.
yeah, here's a question around hiring from the Philippines, because uh, well, I mean, I live in Dubai, and there's loads of Filipino in Dubai, the Filipino people in Dubai, and I love Filipinos' culture. We're so friendly. You can have a laugh, you can have a joke, um, and I've got friends that are from the Philippines in Dubai that are very switched on and bright and capable. But I think in the UK and in the US, there can be a stigma attached with the Philippines. Like, are they going to be at the level that I need? Are they going to be able to communicate how I need? Are they going to be able to be as switched on? And some people can be quite worried. And to be honest, Kirsten's the first assistant I've hired from the Philippines. My others were from Ukraine. One was from Russia, and I did have somebody in from the UK, but it didn't go so well. So I had an unconscious bias of, well, like I've heard some real horror stories. Like obviously the Philippines is a huge place with a hugely talented population. What would you say? I now know, and that was before I moved to Dubai, and then I was like, oh, Filipinos are bloody great. What was I thinking? What would you say to people that have that unconscious bias, or they're not sure?
Well, a lot of it. comes from, like you just said, like not knowing, like not being around Filipinos, or not knowing any Filipinos sometimes in their life. And it's funny because like when I was in between our rescheduling saga between the two of us, I was in Europe for a month, and for some of them, it was the first time that they've ever met a Filipino, and they were like, "Oh, your English is really good." And that's the first thing people
Yeah.
always comment on. I'm like, no, it's taught in schools. We're tested on it. It's part of like entrance exams when we're trying to get in college or trying to even to get into high school. So English is very much ingrained because that's the first thing people usually think, like that our English isn't as good, and even better. And I always reference my sister for this. We have TV. At one point, my sister even had a English accent because she was watching Peppa Pig for so long. So that's usually the first one. Is it is ingrained in our education, in our day to day, and most of the time for people who usually think like, oh, I'm not sure about the culture wise. I'm like, no, culture wise, we actually also adapt really well, mostly because again, we have TV, we have the media, we see that. Plus, people usually forget that the Philippines were quote unquote colonized, taken over by the Americans for about 30 something years, 33 years,
Mhm.
um, back in the early 1900s, I think 1930 to 1940, something like that, like before the World War. Um, we have the Americans. So culture wise, is kind of again also still ingrained within
Mhm.
us. So that's why it's so easy. But on the flip side, there are always things to, as with any country, with any culture, there's always things
Mhm.
to keep in mind. Of like, one is most Filipinos, about 7 out of 10 will be very shy, which is where you hear the you know applicants ghosting you or employees ghosting you, but honestly that's most cultures anyway. But like for Filipinos, we put in so much pride in what we do that when we don't think that we're going to be able to go to do a good job, we will actually leave. That I've seen that happen, and it was funny for me to experience it myself, where I was in an interview. This is when I was consulting for people to hire. We were in an interview, and we were asking really good questions. The interview was doing well. The client asked this very specific question, and all of a sudden they dropped the call, and we were like, and it was not responding to me calling them up on their phone. I'm like, oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So there are things to keep in mind, and of course, because we're very family oriented, if things do happen in family, sometimes we'll need a little break because we want to take care of everyone else around us. So there's different things. There's always pros and cons, but to be honest, like the Philippines in general, just because we're a little bit plugged into the internet, is it's faster to get really good skills, and getting people who are really good at what they do and also have the personality to match it too.
Yeah, and I think like something about you guys that you do really well is your internal training. Like Kirsten comes to me with, "Hey, I've just been doing a Chat GBT training, and I think
Mhm.
we could potentially implement this here." Or, "Hey, there's an automations training. If you think it's worth doing, let me check it out." Because
Mhm.
the key value add for me with working with you guys is, well, I don't know what I don't know, right? So first of all, who am I to actually, if I want a world class assistant, or who am I to train a world class assistant? Because I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that standard looks like, and you have been able to identify that with the individual and the way in which they think and feel, and then plugging in those training systems has been an absolute game changer. On the cultural side, I think. One really interesting thing that I've noticed with the Filipino, even my Filipino friends in Dubai, is like you said, there's a shyness. There's almost like uncomfortable around conflict, and
Mhm.
that was something that we worked on with Kirsten early. It's like I can sense there's like if a mistake had been happened, it was like, oh, okay, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, sorry, moving on. And well, hang on, well, we can learn from this. That conflict side. Um, can be a challenge. But on the flip side, there's a real warmth and a real care and a real like happiness, like a real upbeat positivity, which I really like and I really enjoy. And then it comes down to any individual. So it's just if you're worried, oh, but I've heard this story and this story. Well, there are people from all sorts of countries and cultures, and you get good high performers, low performers everywhere, and you got to look at the individual and their story and their background. I mean, if we look at Kirsten, she's got an agency background, she's got a degree, she's super organized. You know, whereas if I had let that unconscious bias or just stories and not actually explored that, and you guys do a great job at hiring, at picking people that, yeah, this could be a good fit. Um,
Hmm.
it makes everything a hell of a lot easier for sure. So I guess outside of that, is there any questions you might have for me as a client from my experience that you'd love to ask?
I have a ton actually. I was kind of keeping them just in case that you had other questions. Well, one is as we're kind of talking a little bit about like the cultural differences, and I love that you caught the because I remember that specific moment of what you're talking about when Kristen made a mistake and she was like a little bit not too freaking out, but it was freaking out enough that I heard it. I'm like, oh, that's what's going on.
Mhm.
So I always try to keep a mental note. Other than that, is there anything that you've noticed versus like when you work with other virtual assistants, culture wise, that has either been really amazing and also like, oh, I have to watch out for that one.
Mm. Like I said, the positivity, like very positive. Not that my other assistants weren't positive, but it's like it's a different. To be fair, everyone that's worked at TMP has always been very positive and very warm. So I think that's more of just a natural culture fit. Um, I noticed that, yeah, family is a really big deal, and if there's family troubles, it can really affect really affect you guys. It's not that it doesn't affect us, but I think with us, we kind of, and this is a British thing, we kind of have this stiff upper lip, like put it in a box and just ignore it, and then like, oh well, we'll deal with it when we kind of need to. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's more around how you guys really deal with things. Um, I don't know, it's just like the word I'd use is pleasantness. They're just a really nice, pleasant, and with you guys anyway, and all of my experiences, there's just a general pleasantness and very humble. Like I see you guys as one of the market leaders in what you do. So with that, there could be a lot of ego, and there could be a lot of like, well, like take it or leave it. If you don't like it, get lost. Da, 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 but it's not like that at all. And I think that's really important. Our three values at TMP are be water, high performance, be honor, integrity, and transparency, and be love. And
Hmm.
you know, I think you guys embody all of that. And all of my interactions with Filipinos have been that, right. So on the culture side, yeah, I don't think there's anything glaringly outstanding. Like, whoa, be careful of this, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Got it. And
Actually,
what's
sorry,
something?
there is one thing. If you're a high, so I'm not, I do conflict, but I'm not high conflict. But if you're a high conflict person and you like people to, um,
Push
some
back.
people enjoy and I do with my mentors in particular. I have very high conflict mentors, and we can wrestle with that. But if you need somebody that is going to be in high conflict all the time, then that might be a challenge. Obviously, some
True.
individuals are different, but if you're somebody that's going to be quite intense and quite short and sharp, why hasn't this been done? What is about this? What about that? How did you drop the ball? If you're going to be like that, you're going to create a lot of problems. Is what I'd say.
Yeah. No, we've had it before where when we're hiring a client, very self-aware, said, I need someone to push back. And usually it does take us a while to be able to find that person who will push back. Like I said, 7 out of 10 times, it's probably a little bit of a shyer Filipino.
Mm.
It was us finding the 3 out of the 10 to be able to fit. They do exist, but yeah, it is I could we could go into the history of like being colonized for different countries or like the fact that we're an island nation, we have to take care of each other, hence
Mm.
the family mindset. um there's a lot of different things, but that is a really good one. Is like, if you are someone who wants to make sure that the assistant knows that they have to be scared of you, they're already scared of you, chances are.
Yeah.
um, um, and one that I'm always curious about, and I love asking this question to either clients or people who just work with virtual assistants in general, is what's something that you wish that you knew when you started? I think you reflected on a lot of things that like the prejudice, not prejudice, but like just the unconscious bias. But what's the one thing that you wish that you knew before you got started in having more of a full time assistant?
I just wish I had a full time assistant earlier. Like the speed at which I can hit stuff now, like the speed at which things move forward. Um, it's night and day. I genuinely believe I probably maybe double, if not double, at least like 1.5 times the speed and my revenue if I had just been operating at that speed much faster. So I think speed is the key thing, is that ability to move and go, oh, we need to pivot on this campaign. It's not like, oh, okay, well, I'm back online. It's like Sunday night. Oh, I'm back online on Tuesday. I can do it then. It's like, right? Monday afternoon, this is going to be actioned. And I think with speed comes peace. Peace that, all right, stuff's going to get done, and it's going to get done fast, and it's going to get done well. I think that, yeah. So that moment in that small mastermind where, yeah, oh, it hasn't figured it out yet. I was like, ah, I wish I knew that earlier. Oh my! I wish I knew that. Oh my god! It really was one of those moments. But the compound effect of knowing it now and what that's going to have on my trajectory, on the business's trajectory, going forward is, yeah, it's exciting.
There you go. That's basically all my questions. Those are two things I'm always curious, and I do make a point of asking. So yeah.
Cool, awesome. Well, look, guys, if you're listening to this and you've got any questions, where can everyone find you guys?
Of course, we have the 2XU website, which is all of our content and everything else. It's 2xyou.com. I'm the most active on LinkedIn. I would say technically my assistant is the most active on LinkedIn. If you message me on Instagram, it'll take a few days because that's the only one that I manage myself.
Hmm.
But everywhere else, I'm a YouTube channel full of YouTube videos to teach people on how to hire online, how to get started online as well. And Yeah, everywhere else usually online. I'm very,
Cool.
very much plugged in.
Awesome. Well, look, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, God, I need a full time assistant that's going to be fully trained and a good match for me, then we'll get Kirsten to drop a link below this podcast in the description. Check it out and go and see what 2X you're up to. Because, yeah, for me, they've been such a game changer. And the speed at which I'm able to hit things now, it's like, yeah, I regret not signing up sooner. So, yeah, just thank you, Le-an, and thank you to Kirsten if you're listening to this back for everything that you guys do. It's been life changing. So, thank you. Cool. All right, team. Well, look, if you found this episode helpful, share it out into the world. Share it with anybody else that you think that's in the process of looking at VAs, or if you need anything there. Follow Le-an. Drop her a message on Instagram or LinkedIn on their website. And that's another episode. We'll catch you all next time. Big love.